Are you too old to go back to school? I want to talk about that today. I think it's a really important question that I think is really important. So if you don't know me, I am Professor Dave Masek. I'm Associate Professor of Innovation Strategy and Entrepreneurship, and I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. There's so many people that help me out that I want to pay the favor forward to help you out as much as I possibly can. So by the way, I created this sort of sharing economy editing platform. You can check it out to help you do your work better. And I think it's really cool. That's what reciprocity.com is. And that's how we started doing all of this YouTube-y kind of stuff. All right, so are you too old to go back to school? And the way that I think about this is I want you to think about not necessarily your age or anything like that. I want to think of you as a company, right? If you think about what drives company performance. And we're all kind of sole proprietors. I don't know if you sort of imagined that before, but we're all our own, that's Izzy in the background. We're all our own little kind of single companies, and we have people that will pay us wages, that's the revenue that you're bringing in, and then you have to sort of pay off whatever those, your costs are. That's our own little tiny companies that we have. So the thing that actually drives company performance, this is pretty universal. I don't know of a single study that has shown otherwise. In fact, it's become so solidly implanted in the way that we sort of look at companies. We have to do what is called controlling for these factors. And the way that we control for these factors, looking at no matter what it is, right? So company performance, CEO performance, the top managers at the company's performance, we have to control for things that are related to education. They're very, very strong predictors on the success of companies. They're very strong predictors in any sort of way. So things, what I'm talking about here, right? So general for top management team, education is like, what level of education that they have is almost universally, like it's so solidified that people don't even question it anymore, right? Like there's such a strong relationship, and you could see that in the data. It's almost always, I've never seen a study that I've seen like the reverse, where more education didn't necessarily mean better performance in whatever that company is, right? I just have not seen that. Maybe there are studies out there, I don't know. But there's other things that are sort of related to that, right? Like, so your what's called marketing capabilities. So how well you do marketing, how well you do research and development, how much are you spending on research and development? These are really things that are directly tied to education, right? Research and development basically means getting an education for a company, right? That's all you're doing is getting an education, is you're just kind of spending some time thinking about how you can do things better. And that's what research and development is within companies, right? They're thinking about different ways that I can do things better. And all those kind of things. Whatever it is, those different, there's other different sort of constructs that we look at. But generally, anything that is basically like a substitute for education has a strong positive impact on performance. Now, to what extent the positive impact is, right? So if I spend $1,000 on education within my company, so that is like, CE, continuing education, all those kind of things, investing in research and development, whatever those particular things are. If I spend $1,000 on that, does that equate to $1,000 in the future of coming back? That's a tricky question. It's really hard to sort of figure this out. In general, in the immediate term, no. You're never going to sort of get that immediate return, right? Like if you spend $1,000, it's unusual. Sometimes you do get that, right? It's certifications and things like that. You will get some sort of immediate benefit and boost in the revenue that's coming in. But generally that doesn't happen. But what happens is that over the long run, you start seeing patterns. You start seeing things like connecting. And then that's how you, by seeing those connecting things, that's how you actually get, bring in more revenue, because those connecting things, there's a lot of sort of patterns in this world that you don't see unless somebody points it out to you. And that's kind of the way that I view education, right? Is like somebody's kind of holding your hand and saying, hey, take a look at this really cool thing over here. and you're like, wow, I've seen that all the time, and I've never seen that. I've never like looked at it and paid attention to it, right? A mud puddle, you step over it and you're like, oh, it's just a mud puddle. But then if you talk to a biologist and they're like, wait a minute, let's take a look at this mud puddle. And you find out that it's like just teeming with organisms and stuff. And you're like, wow. So, what you have to think about is that there is a pretty strong relationship there. And the relationship is long in terms of the returns that you get. It's not like an immediate thing, but you do get returns eventually. Now, the sort of balance that you have is when should you do this, and what is it that sort of matters. So for me, I don't really mind at any age to get an education at any point, because I think that there's always generally a return at some point in the future. So as long as there's always a positive return that's coming in from these activities, I think that's actually a really helpful way to do investing. So it doesn't matter whether you are, 20 or 50 or 100, as long as there's a positive return in the future from the thing that you're doing, I think that's actually a really positive way to do investing. Now, the only time that I don't sort of invest in things, and I don't view it as investing, is if it's going down in value. I think anything where assets are going down in value is a really bad investment, like cars and things like that. So I don't even think of those as investments. I just think of those as luxuries. So that's the way I think about it, is it doesn't matter at what point that you're going to get your education. What matters is that you are leveraging it to do really cool things. And so one way that you can think of education is like this big block, right? It's a 4-year degree, or, it's a 2-year degree or whatever, and it's a big block. Another way that you can view it is that there's little chunks of learning different aspects of things. And those little chunks can allow you to see the world in different ways, right? So those little chunks are courses. And those courses allow you to see the world in little different ways. So even if you get, there's some really cool, if I remember it correctly, there's really cool sort of research on education where economists have looked at this, and they've sort of looked at, did you partially finish courses? And did that have an impact on how much you made in the future? I think that's what they were looking at. And it's Greece is their last name, or I think that's who it was. Anyways, whatever. I digress. But the research is pretty interesting, because they sort of look at this. Did you partially finish this? And there's an effect, a positive effect on future performance from the sort of not just mildly completing a course. And not really get there. I think it was high school courses that they were looking at. I might be misquoting this, but I think this is, I've read a lot. So, what you should think about is that you have these little courses. Those are little tiny things that allow you to see the world a little differently. And those little tiny courses are really helpful. And you just add those all up, and they benefit you. Now, obviously, there comes a point where, you're spending too much on courses, and you're spending too much in education and not enough on sort of getting output from this. So there's this classic problem that we have. It's really well researched in many different areas. It's called exploration exploitation. And that is the idea that exploration is you're trying to sort of look for new opportunities, and exploitation is sort of looking at the things that you already have, and you want to exploit those resources and assets that you already have. And we have to balance those to the right degree. Right, so you want to sort of think about, how can I balance this? So I like to think about like ratios, right? So myself and my family, I hope, we try to look for spend 10% or 15% on sort of growing these opportunities, whether it being the reciprocity project. That's the thing that I'm really curious about right now in terms of building this thing out. But like in other things, like just education in general, beyond, this is on a day-to-day basis. So it's like a ratio, right? Whatever we bring in. So let's say we bring in $10,000 in a year, we're going to spend $1,000 on sort of growing these opportunities. So that allows you to not like ramp it up too much and like go crazy. And so you can live, but then as well, it allows you to sort of explore different opportunities. So it's important to sort of think about those. It's not like an on or off switch is what people think about, but it's like this gradual growth over time. So hopefully this helped you out. I'm a fan, but I also understand that it can, I'm a fan of education, but I also understand that it can be a little tricky. And you have to sort of balance it. So you want to think about, like, how do you balance it? What is the right amount for you? And that's the important thing, is not thinking of it as like this all or nothing, but thinking of it as like, hey, let's balance this out. Let's actually try to figure out what is right for me. And that's where you stop and think. So I recommend education, but then you have to figure out, like, how do you balance it for yourself so that you can go forward? All right, take care and have a wonderful day. Bye.